welcome everyone to another opportunity, another space where we can look deeper and explore and expand our understanding and our consciousness of this universal perspective and this convergent logic. I think the logic has already kind of been explained. The main ideas, the main principles are already kind of being shared. So I think it would be interesting to begin to share together also what are the kind of the living applications, the practical applications which come out from this logic, from this perspective, and just kind of like, well, I understand what you're talking about. I know, I have that intuitive understanding of the logic, but kind of the question normally that people will have after having that resonance with the information is, but what can I do with this? You know, how do I make this functional? How do I make this a living kind of part of my life? And as I said many times, this is not just a kind of nice philosophy and a very kind of coherent information. This is also something which is pointing to a very profound and deep living of actually changing the way that we perceive our reality, and that means a neurological change, and that means a biological change. So first of all, kind of do a little review on what we call the stencil. And the stencil is that drawing, that kind of triangle drawing, which what it kind of is representing is a kind of mental design in order to be able to have a reference system. And what a reference system is, a system which is able to kind of allow us to reference the different planes of perception in the order of their let's see, their implication and their speed. And also another way that we can see it is also like if it was a communication system, a system of communication. And in any system of communication, you also have to have a reference system. And the main important references would be in a communication system is, well, first of all, you need a receptor. A receptor is an instrument, a device, which can receive a signal, okay? But also what you need is an emitter, something which is going to send the signal, send the information. What the receptor is going to do is receive that in order to project it or to share it, yeah? And between the receptor and between the emitter, we have this like a kind of intermediate device, intermediate reference, which would be the decoder, okay? So the emitter sends a signal, the decoder translates that signal into a language where the receiver, the receptor, is able to understand. So seeing this, what would be the receptor? What would we understand as the receptor? Well, the receptor would be our individual self. Me, David Williams, so the individual design would be that receptor. Or what we could call the unfolded character, yeah? Or the biological entity. So we would place that in plane 1, yes? Plane 1 would be that plane where we position the receptor, the unfolded character. And which would be the emitter, which would be the plane which is emitting us the signal? Well, from where we are interested in exploring, it would be that original, initial, universal, inclusive plane, which is that plane 7. Okay? So we have established who's the receiver, who's the receptor, well, me, David, and who's the emitter, well, that aspect with which David is in communication and is the origin of David, or the universal aspect from which the individual David kind of came out from, okay? So there we have already kind of placed those two. Then we have the kind of the decoder, yeah? So the decoder is going to the translator from that emission to that reception of the signal would be that fourth plane, that plane which we'll call the plane of identity, the plane of the design. And basically what the design and the identity is going to allow in this communication is for the receiver to receive that signal from the emitter in a way that he can process, in a way that he can understand. Yeah? So remember, we were talking about identity as in the divergent logic, we were seeing that identity as an interference. And when does the identity become an interference? It becomes an interference when it becomes, or it places itself as the emitter, as the main position from where we are informing ourselves from our reality. Yeah? Our identity is that kind of associative memory built upon our past and on what defines us, what gives us our value, our belief system, etc., etc. But also, that fourth plane is going to have a different role when we're talking about the return, okay? When we're talking about the return, when we're talking about that convergent movement and not so much that divergent movement, that movement of integration more than exploration, well, then that fourth plane is going to be a kind of connector, a kind of translator, a kind of decoder between that emitter and us as a receiver, okay? It's kind of like remember one of the things that, one of the ways to point out to that plane 7 was that which has not got a definition. So that which has not got an existence. It is something which is out of existence, meaning that we can never kind of confine it, define it, limit it to anything that is concrete in the experiential material experience we have, yeah? So, so that's emitter, that origin, is that point from where we want to begin to receive that direct communication. Yeah? So we have, remember, the y-axis, which is that vertical line, and that vertical line always connects our present, our 0 point, with that origin. So the only thing that it's kind of like we are always in contact and communication with that original point, because we are always living and we are always present in point 0 in the present moment. The thing is, if we have that identity informing us, we are not going to be actually opening up to the present. We're going to be defining that present according to our past. Yeah? And the only thing we're going to be doing is really living our past again and again and again. So, well, remember that what kind of connects the conscious level and the unconscious level would be 4 is like the tipping point. It's the tipping point between our conscious and our unconscious. Yeah. Always when we talk about the unconscious, which is in this top part, we are talking about something which is global, which is universal, it's not particular. Yeah. That's why we talk about plane 5 as the plane of the unconscious, the plane of the logic. And the logic of each identity is always universal. It's always the same. It could be a divergent logic or a convergent logic, but it's always the same. But the way that logic affects each identity is it's a particular individual way, in a particular way. Yeah. So at the top we have plane 5, the plane of the logic, plane 6, plane of the potential. Yeah. So it's kind of from emptiness we have all the potentials available. Yeah. So emptiness or nothingness or is that point which originates any possibility, any potential. But to be able to make that potential go from an abstraction to a concrete reality, we need a logic to guide it. It could be a logic of experience or it could be a logic of purpose. Divergent logic, convergent logic, yeah? And then we need, in order for emptiness to explore a part of itself, we need an identity. An identity is something that has a definition. It has a concrete definition, as we explained, yeah? So, and what connects the identity, the design, with the experience, with the reality, with the unfolded character? Well, always in the conscious level, which is this level at the bottom, we're always going to have the mixture of the two principles. We're going to have information plus energy, and that's going to create a reality. Okay. So what is the informational part of our conscious principle? Well, it's going to be the mind. The mind, the mental plane, has that informational principle in it. And what is going to be the more energetic? Well, it's going to be our emotional plane. Yeah. And when we have an information with an energy, what we're going to have is an experience or a reality in plane 1. Okay. So good. That to kind of just do a little review of what the stencil is. Now I understand I am an individual receiver, individual receptor of that universal principle. And how can I establish that communication? Yeah? Well, first of all, and the most important, is that you have to have kind of an impulse, an authentic impulse, what we could call a resonance, something that moves you to want to begin to link your individual life to that universal observer. Because this is an important aspect, because not everyone in their life is actually prepared or actually is part of his journey at the moment to begin to dismantle his individual and identity in order to create a communication between that original observer and this biological person. Yeah. So there has to be an authentic. What is important to hear? This is not a kind of another desire of the mind, another need of your identity. Because if you are seeing it as a kind of like a sweet, a chocolate, something to collect for my life, you know, I looked for the job of my dreams, it didn't fulfill me. I looked for the wife, it didn't work, and now I'm going to try this out. that's not how it works. It's not about trying it out. It's about having a deep, profound impulse and self-referential impulse, a resonance to want to move in towards that real universal observer. And it's kind of like the same way that you cannot force a flower to open or a seed to begin to grow, you cannot force, never, this resonance in a person. This is nothing that can be forced from the outside. You know, no one can kind of just inject you with something for you to have this resonance activated. This is something that just organically and naturally, it's going to move you within, yeah? So you're going to hear what I'm saying, and something within is going to be touched, is going to be moved, is going to be authentically resonance with what I'm talking about. And of course, a lot of people are not going to even understand it, and not even going to want to go down that road, okay? Because they still want to go down the journey of experiencing, the journey of duality, the journey of winning, losing, goodies, baddies. They still want to be in that story, okay? And that is fine, because everybody's got their own questions and their own journey, and the most important thing here is authenticity with your own process. Being authentic. When you are authentic, when you find that authentic move within you, that is gonna be the best kind of anticipation, the best intuitive guide, GPS, let's say, yeah. So if you're authentically resonating with where this is presenting, that is the first point. You've got the resonance, okay? The resonance, sometimes I say it's like activating the seed. So you've activated the seed, yeah? But it's not only with resonance. Resonance is just a kind of an initial point, yeah? It's kind of like, let's say, it's a must. It's a must. But what begins to open this process and begins to make our individual person being kind of filtrated and informed by the origin of the universe, yeah? Well, together with this resonance, we would have to say a decision. And we can't really, because one thing which is required to begin to make this communication clean and available is that we have to begin to dismantle the self-protected identity. That's an important part. So we have to change the logic which is functioning within our unconscious. And the logic which is functioning within our unconscious globally, or most generally, is a divergent logic, which means that each identity is going to try and protect its identity. But when we want to open up to a universal perspective, protecting our own self-definition is never going to allow us to expand our consciousness from that universal point, from that plane 7, yeah? So one thing that decision is about, it's this decision of becoming available beyond what my identity wants or doesn't want, okay? So the beginning of the process of that decision is kind of dismantle my identity. That decision is kind of saying, I want to dismantle the logic which is self-protecting my identity. And it's kind of a total derivation of your identity, because this is not about being moved anymore by our identity. It's about being moved by that origin, by that observer, that inclusive observer. It's kind of like the wave allowing the ocean to move it. Okay, and the thing is that it's always been that way, really. But the perception we have is that our identity is the one in charge, is the one moving the strings, you know. Our identity is the one that, and that's kind of like saying that the wave is the one that is moving the ocean, okay? But, so again, what this is a correction of our perception. And this is kind of saying, well, no longer am I going to kind of move my life from the interests of my identity. I'm going to become available for the origin to begin to move my wave, to begin to filter in through me and kind of move me through my life, yeah? So that decision is very important because we cannot control the unconscious. We cannot change the unconscious from the conscious. The unconscious is a lot more faster. It's a lot more, it has the conscious is a very small percentage of what is really going on. So it's kind of like we are really consciously realizing what's in a very small percentage, yeah? The unconscious is kind of like that iceberg, yeah? So like you see the tip of the iceberg, but there's a whole kind of chunk of ice beneath that, which would be the unconscious. So we cannot kind of control our unconscious. But what we can do, how can the conscious become in communication with the unconscious? Through decisions, through a decision. So, kind of like when we make that inner self-referential decision of becoming available to the origin, that is going to that signal is going to reach our unconscious, and what the unconscious is going to do is begin to, if that decision was authentic, is going to begin to prepare itself in order to have a communication based on a convergent logic. Convergent logic is always going to be the logic which connects us with a universal perspective. A divergent logic is always going to be the logic which connects us with a particular perspective, yeah? A personal perspective, yeah? So this is saying me individual receptor, it makes the decision, the self-referential decision of derivating my perception, my receptor, my life, if you want to call it that way, to become available from that original point. So that decision is kind of like placing our identity in 0 point. So if we see it, the decision would make that, like, that's what we can do with our conscious, yeah? We can be receptive to that resonance, which is telling us time is ready, you are ready to open up to a new logic, you're ready to open up to be available to the original universal observer. And then it's just waiting to see if you want to make the decision or not. Okay, let's put in those words. Once we make the decision, it's like we are kind of delivering our identity. We're delivering our the speculations, the expectations, the dreams, everything of our identity, and we just becoming open and available. Yeah. So somehow, after that decision, we don't have to do anything else. We just have to open up to it. Yeah. Consciously, we don't have to do a lot more, but that is going to begin to activate a whole process in this top point, on this top point, yeah, which is the unconscious. And it's going to begin a whole transformation of the logic and the way that we are going to be taking those potentials, yeah. And then that is going to begin to filter down, yeah, and that's going to begin to filter down, and from receiving that decision, it's going to emit us new versions. So a transformation in our perception, yeah? A transformation based on our availability to that original point. And that what's going to begin to, we are going to also be receiving that that process, yeah? So the way of receiving it is that we are going to begin to have intuitions, different perceptions, different understandings. It is actually going to transform from the basis, the way that we see our lives and reality. So this is not just a kind of small decision, yeah? It's not an interest decision. It is a very deep, profound, and self-referential decision, yeah? It's not like, oh, this sounds cool, so let's try it out, like if it was a drug experience or something like that. Because if that is the way that you're positioning yourself, it is not only not going to work, it is going to be counterproductive. Yeah? Because you are forcing yourself into a position which you are really not prepared, and on the other side, you have not really made a decision to be prepared, yeah? Or an authentic decision. So, how are we going to begin to do this? Well, first, realizing that decision. But what is the moment, which moments of the day are we going to consciously make that decision? The best moments is before we go to bed, before we go to sleep. And this is what we're going to call the night derivation. This is the most fundamental application, if you want to call it, of this proposal, of this perspective. And it all starts with a decision and a derivation before we go to sleep. Because before we go to sleep, what happens is that we go from that slow conscious level, and when we are asleep, we go into the unconscious level, the fast speed level, okay, of the unconscious. And it's kind of like, that is the point where it's going, the unconscious, yeah, the abstract, the invisible, is going to begin to reorder all the informations we collected during the day somehow. So if we have made the same decisions based on our past, of course it's going to reorder our unconscious, and it's going to reorder our following day based on those decisions. That's why people are kind of trapped into circular experiences, because they don't open up to a different decision. They're not really informing their unconscious. I want to be available to something different. Yeah? They are kind of, but unconsciously they don't know. It's like they don't know they have this power. Let's say they don't know they have the decision. But I think the time has come where we have to realize that the decisions that we make within ourselves have a direct impact and a direct communication with our unconscious, and the unconscious from that decision is going to reorder from the top on bottomwards. Yeah. So we can't control and change it, like saying I want to change all the divergent logic in my unconscious and all the programming of my subconscious. We can't do that consciously, but we can become available to the returning point. Okay. So before we go to bed, we recognize what? We recognize that me, David, this receptor, this biological receptor, makes a decision, a self-referential decision, to derivate his receptor, his perception, his neurology, his brain, he derivates everything to that original observer in order to do that torsion, that returning point towards our real perception, to begin to see through the eyes of a convergent logic more than the eyes of the divergent logic. Okay, so let's say that is the tipping point, that is the turning point when we make that decision, and it's not a emotional decision, it's not a energetic decision. It is actually just a sincere, logical decision, yeah? And before we go to bed, we make that decision. And the first day that we go to bed and we make that decision, we go to sleep and we make that decision, we call that the first day of the logical link. The first day of the link established between this receptor and that abstract emitter. Yeah? It's also, this is kind of like a derivation is in all the applications which I will be talking about in the next programs. At the end point to the same position. It is not a doing. It is actually a letting do. Letting us be done more than doing. But for that, we have to have that impulse. We have to make that decision. And as I said, it starts with that first derivation at night. And that's where kind of like something in the unconscious receives that decision and understands, okay, that receptor is opening to a returning point. So we have to begin to reorder the unconscious in order to make that process, okay? Now, each person has got a unique process and a unique frequency of communication with that universal perspective. We can say that we are all linked to that origin, but the way that we are going to link with it and be informed by it is going to also be very unique to our own model of receptor, okay? Sometimes I say kind of like the sun is available to all of us, but the way that we use the sun and the way that the sun has an impact on us is very different. It's not the same for a tree than a human being, but we are connected to the same sun, yeah? And actually that sun is somehow informing, that same information of the sun is informing the tree and me, but we have different models of receptors, we have different designs. So each person has their own design and has their own path of beginning this turning, beginning this returning to ourselves, this mutation in the unconscious, yeah? So it's kind of like that origin and the unconscious going to begin to prepare all the steps, all the needed steps. It's like it's going to make a calculation, a mathematical calculation of saying, okay, this is what's needed for that process. This is what's needed. And what is needed is not always, and a lot of times, it is against the expectations and the wants and needs and desires of our identity. Because something within doesn't want to function through identity anymore. No matter, even if it's become their life and success of their identity. Their identity gets everything at once. It is a whole positive success. But there's something inside that says, but this is not enough. This is not it. There's something else. That something else is to begin to operate from a plane that goes beyond our identity. Yeah, kind of like I said, that decision is like the wave saying, I want to be pushed by the ocean. I don't have to push anything. I don't have to, I just have to synchronize. That's what's going to begin to happen with that decision from that deep point within ourselves, that original deep point. Everything is going to begin to synchronize. And that synchronization between that unconscious and our conscious, between the universal aspects and our personal aspects, that synchronization is going to mean a dismantling of our identity. And if you see, when we've drawn this kind of 8, this vertical 8, which connects the 3 observers, it connects the emitter, the receiver, and the decoder. Look how plane 4 ends up. It ends up closed in 0 points. So our identity has to become empty, has to become 0 points. Okay? So it's no longer about protecting our self-identity. It's about letting go of our identity, because our identity, when it's not trying to become, let's say, the driver of the story, the driver of the car, what the identity becomes is a technical translator, decoder between the origin and our particular self. Okay, so we will continue a bit after, go into the Night Derivation. So basically, this program, I wanted to really look into what the application is and how to begin to live this. And in this first program, I really want to look at the Night Derivation, the importance of the Night Derivation, yeah? Because that's how it all begins, that's how it all started. And that's the most important, let's say, practice, but I don't like the word, because we are not, remember, we are just making a decision to become available, yeah? And we are just going to kind of flow available with whatever is required in order to establish that communication, yeah? So like I said, it's not, most of the times, to dismantle the identity is to actually go against what it expects, it wants, and it needs, and all that. So it's kind of, we're not asking something to the origin. We are becoming available. We are not trying to tell the origin what we want from it. We are saying, whatever you need, I am available. Whatever, I want to become functional within this, because at the end of the day, what is the receptor, the biological receptor? It's a vehicle for that origin, for emptiness, to be able to explore itself, and to be able to expand its awareness, its consciousness of itself. And this is the point where we say, well, I become available. I become available to return back the experiences. I want to return back the answers somehow, yeah, of the questions, yeah. So whatever is needed, you kind of just say whatever is needed. If I have to have a great time in the returning process, I'm available. I'll have a great time. But if I have to go through some difficult transitions, I'm available, because there's nothing in the world of identity that I'm really interested in anymore. I just want to return back to myself, back to the origin, yeah? So again, what we're looking into the kind of practical application of the understanding of this logic, and that the first tool, we can say, the first application would be this Night Derivation. Okay, what's going to begin to happen with the Night Derivation? It's kind of like, for those who have seen the movie Inception, in Spanish it's called The Origin, Inception. It's going to begin to, it's kind of like that decision is going to be a kind of somehow an inception within the deepest aspect of ourselves. And like also what happens within the movie is that when they were able to place in the movie, it's a bit different because they try to force an idea within the subconscious of a person. But let's just take it as an analogy. When we activate more than we we make an inception. When we activate the deepest part within us, okay, that origin within us, that original point, that initial point, that reality, that is going to begin to have a kind of synchronized effect in the other levels of ourself. Okay, like in the movie, when they establish the inception in the subconscious of the person, they say it is going to transform the way that person perceives his life, because it's going to go from the deepest of his subconscious into the different levels that go from the subconscious to the conscious. I call it subconscious because they are still kind of operating within a lineal unconscious. It's not that vertical unconscious, okay? But we'll leave that for another program. The difference between subconscious and unconscious, or lineal unconscious and non-lineal unconscious, we could leave that for another moment. But for you to understand that when that decision is made, it's like putting that in it's like an inception. It's like fertilizing the deepest points of you, and that's going to begin to do a different like synchronization and transform from that point down to the slowest reality, the conscious reality. Yeah? So a lot of people who have began with this Night Derivation are really amazed of how quick and how deep the transformation begins to happen, and how quickly things that used to be a conflict in their lives before stop being a conflict anymore. Yeah? And the way that they were kind of trapped and limited and kind of feeling of going in circles, then just suddenly, very quickly, they begin the spiral expansive dynamic, and very, very quickly. Well, it depends on each person's process, okay? So the way that the receptor is going to begin to receive that synchronization is very particular to the process of each person. But that's what begins to happen, yeah? And when we make that decision, it's kind of like a no returning point. Of course, when that decision is authentic and it comes from an authentic resonance, if that decision is made from speculation, that is a different story, because it's not real. It's not really it's not gone really deep into the person. Really, it's just stayed very superficial. Yeah, but when that logical link has gone to the deepest point of who we are, well, the ride is about to begin, and it's a point of no return. It is just kind of, we go with the flow, we go with the tide, and if the ocean is rough, we go with the roughness, and if the ocean is calm, we go with the calmness. But we cannot kind of go back. Yeah, we can't stop the process. Yeah, because it's gone from the subatomic levels to our atomic levels, from the abstract to the concrete. And remember, we said that when you change something in the abstract, it's going to have a direct change, a very important change in the concrete. It's like when you are making a program, a computer program, and you change a number, which create, because computer programs basically are just numbers, like the matrix, yeah? And when you change one of those numbers, the whole projection of the program is going to be drastically different. It's going to be very different, yeah? So kind of like, this is when we change, we begin to establish a change within our unconscious levels. It's going to have a whole effect within our conscious levels, yeah? And one of the things that it's going to enhance and it's going to pressure somehow is to dismantle our identity, because our identity is because the logic of our unconscious is going to change. It's going to begin to inform from the return, from the convergence aspect. Yeah? And for that to happen, it has to begin to dismantle the identity. And the identity is kind of like, there's a part of our identity that is an interference. And it's not going to allow enough space and enough emptiness for that original to penetrate. Yeah? So sometimes it's going to have to break in through our identity and break in through the points which are most hidden and most disguised and most blind for us. Yeah? But we're going to welcome that process of the death of our identity, because we are beginning to establish a type of identity which is going to function as a technical translator between that origin and ourselves. Yeah. And another kind of point which could help another thing is that there's no technique for this really. There's no way of how to do the derivation. There's no like guide. You have to do it within yourself, because the only place where you can establish the communication with that origin is within your own self. Nobody else can do it for you and can tell you how to do it. Just they can. Well, the only thing that this is giving you is a logic for you to do it, for you to make that decision, for those who want to make that decision, yeah? And open up to that new reality of perception. Yeah? So you have to find it out, and you're gonna, something that's gonna happen is that each night you're gonna have a different way of doing it, because you are a different person. There's a different perception. It's a different moment in space-time. So each night is a different opportunity to re-establish that communication. Yeah? So this is another thing. We do it every night. It's not just one night, and we do it every night, because every night is like underlining that decision. And it's kind of, I derivate my perception, and I become available to synchronize from your perspective and not from the particular perspective of my identity. Yeah? And another thing which can help you is, well, when we recognize the receptor, me, David, David is a biological entity, living entity, which is connected and made out of the materials of the earth. So the 0 point of David is connected to the 0 point of the earth. David is an aspect which is part of that unity called planet Earth. And Earth is also a receptor, a receiver of that origin. So a way we can also begin to do it is recognize me, David, as a living being of the earth, is connected to that earth, and it's connected, and what is going to connect us all to the same point of the earth is the center of the earth. Why? Because we are all connected to that same center, you know? Every single person is connected to that same center. We are just in different frequencies in the planet, but we all have a common convergence in the concrete receptor Earth in that center. And that center could be like that 0 point, that concrete 0 point of the Earth with which I'm connected, and my concrete 0 point within my biological receptor, in order to have a connection, a communication, or establish the communication with that origin. Yeah. So after the first day, the first derivation, that is the first day of our link. Okay. And the kind of the periods that are going to, the waves of periods of time, in order to absorb a new information from the unconscious to the conscious, is going to be 39 days. 39 days is a quarantine. it is kind of from the moment I place that decision, it's going to take 39 days for that to kind of come down, so that to concretely begin to come down, yeah? So there's going to be a way of kind of having a conscious following of your process through calculation, through time, is through this system of the quarantine system, yeah? So after 39 days from the first initial point to after 39, that's the first derivation, the first quarantine, and then after then 39 days after, it's the second quarantine, and so on. And a significant amount of time for the process to kind of mature, or the first, I like to say, the first leap of the cycle to mature, is 7 quarantines. And 7 quarantines is like 1 quarantine, you can say, of each plane, if you want. It's not gonna be like, you know, the first quarantine is the first plane, because it's multi-dimensional and planes. So it's going to be transforming all the planes. But a way of seeing it is that 7 quarantines is 9 months, and 9 months is the period of time of a new birth, yeah? So that could be a good way to begin the kind of counting to follow your process, yeah? To have a conscious following, yeah? And to say, I began this day, and there's a point, it's not the moment to speak about it now, but it's important if you can remember the day of your first derivation and to kind of write it down and keep it down and follow and have a following. If this is a recommendation to follow, okay, the different ending of 1 quarantine and the beginning of a new, and the amount of days that you're, so you know, after 300 days it's not the same as after 100 days. So you follow it that way, yeah? Because it is this is like, it's a never-ending process of transformation. So there's no like ending point. It's gonna go deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's gonna become clearer and clearer and clearer, and your perception is gonna become more and more convergent. It's gonna begin to see more and more layers, more and more purpose behind existence, because that's another thing that's going to transform in our perception, is that we're going to begin to see the purpose before something that exists. So we're going to see the purpose of everything in our lives and everything around us, yeah? The purpose of the day that I was born, the date of my birth, the purpose of why I went through that experience in the past, the purpose of the good and bad, the purpose of me being with this person, me having this child, the purpose of me living in this country. So that's how duality kind of closes, when we see life through purpose. Because purpose is going to see, the origin, is going to see purpose behind what we call negative and positive. The most essential purpose at the end of the day for the origin is to expand his awareness and expand his consciousness through us as vehicles. And sometimes, a lot of times we need negative in order for that expansion to occur. So we stop seeing life as good and bad. We just see life as opportunities of expansion of consciousness, opportunities of expanding my awareness and perception. And it's not expanding the perception in order to see kind of, energetic multi-dimensions and auras and invisible identities of different planes of frequency of light, of energy. It's not that. It's not about seeing more aspects of light. It's about being able to see clear, being able to begin to see without conflicts, yeah? Or using the conflicts of our life in order to expand our perception. So the sad thing or the limiting thing is not the conflicts. The limiting thing is that we cannot expand our perception and awareness thanks to conflicts. So it's not about not having conflicts in our lives. This is not about not having conflicts. It's about the conflicts allowing us to expand and to grow. Yeah? And as I said, this is a never-ending. This hasn't got a date of. That's it. Somehow you are enlightened or something like that. No. There is a point where you began the process of return. You began the process of dismantling your identity. You began the process of changing the logic within your unconscious. Instead of having a logic which informs you divergence, you begin to have a logic which informs you convergence. And when that does begin at a point, it begins at the point where we have a resonance and we have a decision to become available vehicles and to be moved and to be penetrated, to be immersed and informed from that origin and not from our particular views of our identity. Yeah? Identity is going to have a purpose. Our mind is going to have a purpose. Our emotional, energetic planes is going to have a purpose. And our biological body and reality is going to have a purpose. Everything is going to have a purpose. But the logic from which we live from is different. Normally the purpose in the divergent logic is to have a good time, to enjoy ourselves, to have a lot of money, to have a lot of experiences, to have a lot of things, to have a lot of women, to have a lot of friends, to have a lot of things. Well, the idea of expansion in the divergent is the expansion of experiences and things in my life. The expansion in the convergence is the expansion of how I see the things in my life. So maybe you live in the same house with the same people, but every day it's a total new adventure because you have a total new version of perception. And this is the process of returning. That is the purpose. That is the non-linear purpose. Yeah. And of course, we're going to continue to want to have a good time and go on holiday, of course. But we are not only going to be seeing life through those eyes. So when we cannot have a good time, we can still expand our perception. It still has a value. It still has a use. It still has a function. It still has it is useful. The bad experiences and the good experiences. So you invite all. You invite the good, the bad. You become available to all of them because all of them at the end are going to be material in order to expand our awareness. Yeah? So this is the first application, the Night Derivation, and I would say it's the most important to begin to occur because the way that the transformation is going to happen is from our unconscious to our conscious. Yeah? The conscious is going to make that first decision, and that first decision is going to place our identity in 0 point. And there we let go. There we don't have anything else to do. We just have to allow, we have to give time, we have to give permission for the unconscious to reorder itself from the point of the origin, and for that to return and begin to filter through and penetrate in our lives. So as you see, there's a process, there's an up process, there's a process of going from the concrete to the abstract, okay, from my conscious to my unconscious. And there's a process of the abstract coming down to the concrete, from the unconscious to my conscious, yeah? And that is the dialogue. That is my decision is informing the origin, and the origin is informing me of a new version, a new perception, a new way of perceiving reality, yeah? And we are, us as individual human identities or biological identities, we are informing that origin of what things are not, or what is the part of that origin, because we are a part of that origin. We have a frequency which is personal and is part of the potentials coming out of that original emptiness. Yeah. So that emptiness is kind of understanding itself through me, through you, through everyone. It's growing its awareness, expanding its awareness through all of us. Yeah. But there's a time where we experience it, and there's a time where we integrate it, where we see what we really are, and we are able to communicate the part with the whole and the whole with the part. And that's how we have an integral awareness or consciousness, no? So that's how it all begins. It begins with a resonance, a decision, night derivation, and allow that origin to begin to penetrate and synchronize all the planes that go from the origin to our biological and individual and unfolded self. Yeah. In the next opportunity that we meet together, I am going to talk about a second tool, second application, which is more an application to do while we awake. Okay, while we to kind of, but the night derivation is the initial fundamental point, and what we do during the day is just kind of accompany and guide and help that new birth to take place within ourselves. Yeah. So again, thanks a lot for another meeting together, and we'll be seeing ourselves very soon. Okay, take care, and I leave you with the last song of Lauryn Hill. I'll get out of the boxes. This is somehow what we're doing. Yeah. The decision is to get out of that box of the identity and to begin to allow that 99.9%
This is Point Origin, unfolding the logic of the universe, broadcasting every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Argentina time, -3 GMT. Join us on Facebook, Point Origin, or get in contact through our email, universalperspective777@gmail.com. Excited to return back to our universal perception.